To surrender is not simply to lay down arms. It is to lay down one's soul. There are moments in human history when the voice of one challenges the noise of many. The world watches as a storm brews between power and principle. One man stands firm, not with clenched fists, but with unwavering resolve. When a man stands alone, surrounded by voices that echo demands, threats, and ultimatums, what keeps him from falling to his knees? What allows him to breathe steadily while the storm gathers around him? It is not the size of his army, nor the sharpness of his weapons. It is something quieter, something deeper. It is inner conviction. Inner conviction is the unshakable knowledge that who you are is not defined by what others say, but by what you know to be true. It does not rise with applause or fall with criticism. It is not changed by the opinion of nations, nor by the fear that others try to instill. This kind of strength does not make noise. It does not seek to impress. Like the roots of an ancient tree gripping the earth, it is hidden from view. But it is the only reason that tree can stand when the storm arrives. In this world, power is often mistaken for pressure. The loudest voice is assumed to be the wisest. The biggest fist is seen as the most righteous. But when pressure is applied to something hollow, it collapses. When pressure meets something full, it resists. And when pressure confronts something alive with purpose, it grows stronger. That is why external pressure is not always a danger. Sometimes it is a mirror. It reveals what already lives inside. If there is fear, pressure will expose it. If there is doubt, it will magnify. But if there is deep belief, unwavering values, a code that is honored in private long before it is tested in public, then that pressure becomes a sharpening force, not a breaking one. The leader who faces a world demanding surrender does not simply resist because of pride. He resists because to surrender under pressure is to betray something sacred within himself and his people. There are truths that are not up for negotiation. There are principles that do not bend just because the wind has changed direction. Surrender is not an adjustment. It is an abandonment. When a person or a nation chooses to stand firm, it is not always because they are stronger in might. It is often because they are deeper in spirit. That depth is invisible to those who only measure strength with weapons and wealth. It cannot be understood by those who have never fasted from comfort, who have never disciplined their mind to be still when insulted, calm when provoked, faithful when isolated. The strength of inner conviction is like water in a well that does not run dry. Others may draw from it, try to test it, try to pollute it with threats or false promises. But it remains clear because it flows from a source that is not external. That source is history. It is identity. It is the stories told in whispers during darker times, the prayers repeated in secret when hope seemed lost, the sacrifices made not for visibility, but for the next generation. When external pressure says, "You must bend," inner conviction answers, "I have already knelt to what matters, and that is enough." When the world says, "You must choose peace by submission," inner conviction replies, "Peace without dignity is not peace. It is sleep." When they say, "You are alone," conviction remembers that one man who stands with truth is never truly alone. This kind of strength cannot be taught in war rooms or measured by poll numbers. It is developed in silence, through loss, discipline, and reflection. It is born in the space between pain and patience, where the soul is forced to ask, "What do I truly stand for, even if I must stand alone?" The man or nation who has answered that question cannot be moved by the pressure of another. In the presence of this kind of strength, those who apply pressure often find themselves confused. They do not understand why intimidation is not working, why threats do not provoke fear, why sanctions do not produce surrender. That confusion is not weakness. It is a reflection of their unfamiliarity with anyone who fights not with force, but with faith. And so, in these moments of confrontation, when one is expected to yield and yet chooses to stand, the world witnesses something rare. A man who chooses the stillness of truth over the noise of compromise. A nation that resists not out of pride, but out of principle. a spirit that endures not because it is stubborn, but because it is rooted in something that cannot be bought, bullied, or broken. This is the strength of inner conviction. It is not loud, it is not dramatic, it is not celebrated by those who seek to conquer. But it is the reason some remain unmoved when others fall. It is the quiet power that stands tall while empires crumble. It is the unseen fire behind the calm eyes of the leader who refuses to bow. Not out of anger, but out of alignment with something far greater than fear. Surrender is often spoken of in the language of politics, war, and diplomacy. It is seen as a strategy, a tactical move, or a necessary compromise. But to view surrender purely as a political act is to misunderstand its true nature. Surrender is not only about borders, treaties, or public declarations. It is a deeply spiritual decision. It begins not with words or signatures, but in the unseen realm of the spirit. It is there, in that quiet and private place, where the true surrender or resistance begins. A man may raise a white flag with his hands, but if his spirit still burns with purpose, then he has not truly surrendered. And likewise, a man may shout of resistance and victory. But if fear has already claimed his heart, then he has already been conquered. This is the paradox of surrender, that it is not determined by what the eyes can see, but by what the soul can endure. Throughout history, the greatest defeats were not caused by overwhelming force, but by internal collapse. Armies crumbled not because they lacked weapons, but because they lost belief. Kingdoms fell not only to the enemy's strength, but to their own loss of meaning. The moment one forgets what they are standing for, surrender becomes inevitable, not because they are outmatched, but because they are unanchored. In this light, surrender is not merely a decision made across a negotiation table. It is the quiet death of something sacred within. It is the moment when doubt replaces discipline, when fear replaces faith, and when survival becomes more important than truth. And once that happens, no external agreement can truly explain the defeat that has already occurred within. This is why some choose death before dishonor, not because they enjoy suffering, but because they recognize that life without purpose is not life at all. They understand that a body without spirit is just a shell. And a nation, a people, a culture without the will to stand for itself is no different. To live with bowed head is not the same as peace. It is merely existence under the illusion of comfort. Not spoken, those who stand firm in the face of threats do so not because they are reckless or unwilling to compromise. They do so because they understand the weight of surrender. They feel the cost of it not just on maps and headlines, but deep within the fabric of their spirit. They know that what is lost in the soul takes generations to rebuild, if it can be rebuilt at all. In this world, many are praised for their ability to negotiate, to retreat, to de-escalate. And often that praise is well earned. But there is a line, a sacred line, where compromise becomes betrayal and retreat becomes abandonment. That line is not drawn by politics. It is drawn by conscience. A leader who refuses to surrender is not always being defiant for the sake of pride. He may simply be protecting something invisible, the spiritual sovereignty of his people. This is not a concept easily understood by those who chase progress without roots, comfort without cost, or peace without principle. For such people, surrender is simply a change in policy. But for those who live by an internal code, surrender is the giving away of something that defines them. There are moments when standing still requires more courage than advancing, when saying no becomes the loudest voice in the room, when silence becomes stronger than speeches. In such moments, the soul is tested, and it is not strength of body or size of nation or number of weapons that decides the outcome. It is the invisible fire within, the spirit's refusal to kneel. This is why some leaders, some warriors, some nations are so deeply misunderstood. Their resistance is seen as stubbornness, their calmness mistaken for arrogance, their silence mistaken for weakness. But what lives within them is not hatred. It is clarity. It is the unshakable belief that some things are too sacred to be surrendered, no matter the cost. And this belief is not born in moments of crisis. It is forged in years of discipline, in moments of solitude, in lessons passed from elder to youth, from prayer to practice. It is cultivated in the way they wake, the way they speak, the way they honor their ancestors. By the time the pressure arrives, they are already prepared, not with reaction but with readiness. In the end, surrender is not written in headlines. It is written in the spirit of the people. Some may sign treaties, raise flags, or lower weapons, but deep down, only they know if they have truly surrendered. And others may stand alone, surrounded by force and isolation, but if their spirit remains unshaken, then no one can truly say they have been defeated. Surrender, then, is not about winning or losing in the eyes of the world. It is about whether you can still look in the mirror and recognize who you are, whether you have kept something untouched, something sacred, something whole. That, and only that, determines if surrender has truly taken place. A warning is not always a roar. Sometimes it is a whisper from the past. It is a voice carried across generations, not designed to frighten, but to awaken. Many people misunderstand the nature of a warning. They think it is a threat, something meant to cause fear, to provoke submission. But a true warning is not born from aggression. It is born from remembrance. It carries with it the weight of lessons learned, the shadows of past suffering, and the hope that those listening will not repeat the same mistakes. Warnings do not come from the desire to dominate, but from the responsibility to preserve. They are given not to create conflict, but to prevent it. When a nation, a leader, or a people speaks in warning, it is often because they have seen where certain paths lead. They have walked through fire and rain, through betrayal and invasion, and now they speak so that others do not blindly enter the same storm. A warning is a form of mercy. It offers a chance to pause, to reflect, to redirect. But too often, the modern mind is too proud to listen. It confuses silence with weakness and humility with fear. It hears a warning and laughs, forgetting that many of history's worst tragedies were preceded by quiet caution that no one heeded. The one who warns does not always want conflict. In fact, it is usually the one who knows war most intimately who wishes most to avoid it. Those who have buried sons, rebuilt cities, and carried scars, visible or unseen, do not speak warnings out of vanity. They speak because they understand the cost of arrogance, because they have already paid the price of ignorance. History does not repeat itself without help. It needs forgetfulness. It needs pride. It needs leaders who think they are the exception to every rule. When warnings are ignored, it is not because the warnings were unclear, but because the listener believed they were invincible. That belief, more than any weapon, more than any army, is what brings nations to ruin. Our warnings also carry with them a kind of sacred responsibility. The one who gives them is not trying to save themselves. They are trying to give others the opportunity to make a different choice. But this requires wisdom to receive. It requires the humility to say, perhaps we are not above the consequences of history. This is a difficult admission for many, especially for those who lead with ego rather than service. The challenge with warnings is that they are often quiet. They do not always arrive with headlines or grand gestures. Sometimes they are spoken in subtle tones, in careful language, in pauses during speeches. Other times they are embedded in culture, in the stories of survivors, in the monuments that stand as reminders of what was lost. But just because they are quiet does not mean they are weak. In fact, the quietest warnings often carry the most devastating truths. It is easy to dismiss a warning when it comes from those we underestimate. But history has shown repeatedly that underestimation is the first step toward defeat. Many empires have collapsed not because they were outmatched in strength, but because they failed to listen. They mistook patience for passivity. They confused discipline for docility. And by the time they realized the warning was real, it was too late. There is a great difference between threatening and warning. A threat is rooted in fear. It seeks to control. A warning is rooted in wisdom. It seeks to protect. One is spoken by those who wish to dominate. The other is spoken by those who have nothing to prove, only something to preserve. This difference must be understood, especially in times of rising tension. Sometimes, a warning is not even directed at the enemy. It is spoken to one's own people. It is a reminder to stay grounded, to remain faithful to core principles, to not be seduced by emotion or provoked into mistakes. It is the calm voice before chaos, the disciplined breath before the strike, the final offering of peace before the gates close. Warnings, if heeded, can be the bridge between conflict and understanding. But if ignored, they become prophecy, and those who ignored them are often the first to claim they were never warned at all. In every era, there have been voices that tried to warn the world. Some were mocked. Others were silenced. A few were remembered, but only after the damage was done. We cannot afford to treat warnings as noise. We must learn to hear them, not just with our ears, but with our memory, our conscience, and our humility. A warning is a gift wrapped in discipline. It is not for those who seek easy answers. It is for those who value foresight over force, wisdom over pride. When a leader gives a warning, they are offering a door. To ignore it is not bravery. It is blindness. And history is merciless with those who walk blindly into its fire. Leadership is often mistaken for volume, for loud speeches, bold declarations, and visible authority. The modern world has come to associate leadership with charisma, headlines, and dominance. But real leadership is not measured by how loudly a person speaks or how many people they command. It is measured by vision, the ability to see beyond the present moment, to act with foresight, and to guide others not just with power, but with purpose. A true leader does not need to shout to be heard. Their presence carries weight, not because of fear, but because of clarity. When they speak, people listen, not because they are forced to, but because they sense that this person has seen something they have not. Vision gives a leader the ability to stand still while others rush, to remain grounded while others panic. It allows them to see what lies beyond the immediate conflict or temptation. It helps them walk the narrow path between pride and compromise. The leader who leads with volume may stir temporary excitement, but their noise fades with time. Their energy may dominate a room, but it often lacks direction. Without vision, volume becomes a distraction. It keeps people busy, but not moving forward. It creates motion without progress. Vision, on the other hand, creates momentum. It gives every step meaning. It transforms struggle into sacrifice and sacrifice into legacy. A leader with vision is like a lighthouse. They do not chase the ships, nor do they raise their voice above the waves. They remain steady, quietly shining a light that others can follow. Whether or not they are praised, whether or not they are seen, they continue to serve their purpose, not for attention, but for those who need guidance in the dark. This kind of leadership does not always make headlines. It does not always win popularity contests, but it shapes lives, inspires resilience, and creates foundations that last beyond the leader's own time. Because vision is not self-serving. It is not about ego or fame. It is about seeing something greater, a future, a standard, a possibility, and aligning one's life to move toward it, even when the path is lonely or unclear. Many people in positions of authority are mistaken for leaders. But authority without vision is simply control. It is management, not leadership. True leaders do not just direct people, they elevate them. They do not just issue commands, they cast purpose. They understand that to lead is to carry the weight of others' hopes, fears, and futures, and to do so with discipline, compassion, and foresight. In times of crisis, the difference between volume and vision becomes clear. The loud leader may create chaos, point fingers, and amplify fear, but the visionary leader becomes a still point in the center of the storm. They observe, reflect, and respond with precision. They do not rush decisions to appear strong. They understand that true strength lies not in reaction, but in response. Vision gives a leader patience. It allows them to resist the temptation of easy victories and short-term applause. It helps them choose long-term integrity over immediate approval. They are not swayed by popular opinion because their guidance does not come from external noise, but from internal clarity. Their decisions are not reactive, but intentional. The power of vision is not in what it sees alone, but in what it creates. It gives people something to believe in, something to aim for, even when circumstances are uncertain. It teaches others to look up when they feel like falling, to keep moving when their path is unclear. Vision transforms suffering into meaning and waiting into preparation. A leader with vision knows that their legacy is not in the words they say, but in the direction they leave behind. They know that their voice may one day be forgotten, but if their vision is clear, the people they led will continue walking long after they're gone. This is the leadership that does not need applause to feel valid. It does not rise and fall with polls or titles. It stands because it serves something greater than itself. The true leader may be quiet. They may not fill the room with their presence, but they will fill it with direction. Their vision will become a compass for others, pointing the way forward through uncertainty. They will remind people not just of where they are, but of where they could be. And in doing so, they will do more than lead. They will awaken. They will shape minds, guide spirits, and create movements not built on noise, but on insight, integrity, and unshakable purpose.